Hello, welcome to the Gridiron Show. Will Gavin alongside Simon Clancy, Gridiron features editor. It's Monday, it's about 4 o'clock, and I finally got some sleep maybe 10 hours ago after an absolutely sensational first Sunday to the London Games for the 2022 season. And it's only going to get better next weekend because not only are the Green Bay Packers in town for the first time ever, not only for the first time in 32 attempts are we actually getting two winning teams in London at the same time, because the Giants somehow, as well as the Packers, are both 3-1. But Simon Clancy is also going to be in attendance and attempting to chat with his old buddy, Aaron Rodgers. Simon, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I did have a 24-hour long day yesterday. Not complaining about it, just stating facts that if I say anything stupid or particularly, untoward today, I'm sure it won't be too bad. Baseless, ridiculous, annoying, frustrating. No difference to my normal performances on this show. But yeah, I did do a couple of meetings for work today on which I said some weird stuff and kind of thought, right, you probably need to go back to bed.
I mean, it's for the best, mate, to be fair.
How was your Sunday? How was your Sunday enjoying the games at home, not with us in the beautiful, sunny?
It's weird. I always think the early starts are really weird, those sort of 2:30 kickoffs, because, 38, 39 seasons as a fan, I don't expect games to start at 2:30, so I always find it slightly weird. But yeah, it was good. I mean, the first game was the London game wasn't great until it was great, and then the last sort of 5 minutes of it were absolutely bonkers. But it was great. My partner worked a lot last week with the Vikings and just said how amazing they were as an organization from top to bottom in terms of all the stuff that they did. The players were great. The staff behind the scenes were great. Kevin O'Connell, fantastic. The way they worked with the kids and all the sorts of stuff that they did was from top to bottom. And that's kind of what you want to hear as well, isn't it? You kind of want them to come over and you want them to embrace it, but also just to be nice people. And it was great to hear that, Kevin O'Connell and Jefferson and Adam Thielen and all these guys, Harrison Smith, were just fantastic with everybody, media, kids, support staff, all that sort of stuff. I know it sounds a bit twee, but you kind of, when you meet your heroes, you want them to be heroic, and, heroism doesn't always come on the field. God, what am I talking about?
I thought I was going to be the baggy mess.
What have I become?
Look, I've got to say, I'm with you. I didn't get to go to the Vikings practice on Friday, but all reports from Vikings was they essentially put everyone up for availability. If you wanted some time with Justin Jefferson, you could go and get some time with Justin Jefferson. All right, you'd have to wait and you'd only get 3 questions in, but there's not a lot of teams that will offer that opportunity when they come over to London.
He just went and sat with the press anyway and just hung out with them. Like, I've got nothing else to do, so I'll just come and hang out with you. And it was like, wow.
I did, I have to say, and the Vikings have been over 3 times to London. They're 3-0, and their support staff and everything have always been absolutely brilliant when they've come over. And they've always brought players over in the summer. I can remember speaking to Harrison Smith and Eric Kendricks back in the summer of 2014, and still both veterans on that defense, and caught up with both of them in the locker room last night afterwards. And honestly, like, they are one of those teams. There's a great atmosphere around them. It helps that they won. And actually, to praise the New Orleans Saints, they were in town all week. They were brilliant all week. Our commentator on TalkSport, Olly Wilson, went into their locker room, and, Cam Jordan, the 2 tight ends, all were willing to spend 5 or 6 minutes chatting to him, despite the loss, really giving him some good time, giving him some good answers. So, like, I can't put down that organization in any way, shape, or form.
Great whenever I've been. So Cam Jordan is fantastic. Mark Ingram's great. Alvin Kamara's great. They've always been a really good. I mean, it's 2 really good organizations, frankly. I mean, losing locker rooms are terrible. I mean, do you remember when we went to Atlanta and they lost, and
the Cowboys.
Yeah, they'd given up 6 sacks to Adrian Claiborne. Do you remember being in that locker room? He walked in and Des Bryant just started like going absolutely apeshit at the media. Do you remember that? That was just horrendous. Like, I've been in the Miami locker room and asked a question. I think it was after a Monday night loss to Carolina, trying to speak to Kiko Alonso. And every time I asked him a question, he just looked at me as if I was stupid, which potentially is not a bad thing. And then just gave like a 1-word answer. It was just like, this is not very fun. And actually, I remember looking up at the late Jason Jenkins and him just going, "It's just let it go." And it's like, okay, thanks a lot, Kiko. See you later, buddy.
We did. I can remember going to Thursday night football in Chicago when they faced the Giants, and this is going back 2013 or something like that. But Eli Manning threw 2 interceptions in the first 2 drives. They went 14-0 down and basically never came back from it. And that was to go 0-5 or 0-6 on the season. Like, it was, that was 2 years after they'd won the Super Bowl, 3 years after they won the Super Bowl, or whatever it was. And they still believed they were contenders. And we went in there and didn't even ask questions. We just went in, felt the atmosphere, left again, because there was just no value to it at all.
I don't want to make a segue into the piece I've written for this month's Gridiron magazine, which is available now. But it starts off with being in New England in 2018, 19. And I think you guys had gone to the Patriots locker room, and Liam Blackburn, formerly of this parish, and I went to the Packers. And it was about 20 days before Mike McCarthy got the sack, and his press conference lasted 89 whole seconds and 4 questions. And then Aaron Rodgers came in, and Aaron had on like a black beanie and a black jumper. And obviously, as they just lost to the Patriots, having really thrown it away because they were driving to win the game, and then Aaron Jones fumbled. He walked in, and the photographer started clicking, and he just went, "Jesus Christ." And at that point, you're just thinking, why would I bother asking a question? Why would I bother? Like, what's the point? But to be completely fair to him, he stood there for 10 minutes, answered everything in a really interesting and informative, as always, kind of way. But yeah, some of those moments where you just like, you're put on the spot to ask that, it's not always easy.
Look, the best thing, just to bring this conversation full circle, and this is meant to be our kind of week 4 review show, but do you know what? I'm quite enjoying just chatting about shooting the shit about the locker room experience. They have, because we're still in that kind of post-COVID era, they're very much limited how many people are allowed in the locker room. They've re-allowed access, but there was probably only 4 or 5 organizations in there. It was us, Sky, a company from Germany. Like, there weren't a lot of people who were necessarily allowed in. And even us, they let us have 1 person per locker room. We weren't allowed to have, a second person to operate a camera or the equipment or anything. You had to kind of do it all on your own. And I had a few good conversations. Dalvin Cook warmed up a lot and was really good value and very strong on, Jefferson was the big talking point with everyone because of the performance he had going, 147 and that jet sweep touchdown as well. And I thought, he seemed really warm. He seemed really great. Harrison Smith was excellent because, we just got the news that Lewis Seen had a lower leg fracture, that he's going to get surgery here in the UK before he flies back separately to the team. And that's, that news just come back, and he was brilliant on Lou, as he called him, and what a great teammate he's been and how warm everyone feels towards him. And, they still expect him to have a great career despite this kind of setback, and all that was really good. It was just the stuff, like, they were so loose and so happy. I had a little chat with Pat Peterson kind of off mic, because we've had him on a couple of times before, but he was going to the podium. They actually sent all the best players as a rule to the podium. But everyone was like, Adam Thielen was really warm. Justin Jefferson was a lot of fun. There was a very funny moment where Jalen Reagor, who of course has been a player who has had to deal with a lot of pelters in his direction since he was drafted by the Eagles above Justin Jefferson, 3 seasons ago now. He'd had a drop in the second half where actually it looked like quite a bad drop, but when you watched it back, it was tipped. And I guess like he was still beating himself up a bit about it. And KJ Osborne took his phone with the highlight off Twitter and went and showed it to Jalen Reagor to show him that the ball had been tipped. And they kind of had this, like, the two of them huddled around the phone, like scrolling back on it on Twitter in the way that we'd be like showing each other a great highlight if we'd missed it on the game. And it's like, I know they're going to go and watch tape eventually, but that was just a really funny moment to me, that they're like, don't worry, bro, like, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. And then, like, Reagor goes over and starts showing it to Adam Thielen. And it was just like, it was very funny. Yeah. I think he must have got quite a bit of stick for that. The game itself, look, Greg Rosenthal from around the NFL, who's one of the guys who was over, summed this up really nicely last night when he was like, it was a bit of a microcosm for the NFL right now, right? It was a close game. It was a fun game. It was 2 teams who could both easily be 3-1 or 1-3, and you'd absolutely believe it. Neither of them looked like they're going to be contending in January or particularly good. And it does feel like outside of, I think the teams that we think are really good, the Dolphins, Bills, Eagles, maybe 1 or 2 others who are like, yeah, they look really spicy early season. Everyone else is in this kind of malaise in the middle where figure it out, get the scheme working, get the coaching right, and you could rise above everyone. But 4 weeks into the season, there's a lot of very middle average team. If you were to do power rankings, you'd have to rank about 10 teams at 16 and then just build the rest around it.
There's not a lot of good football being played at the moment. I think that, like you say, it felt like a microcosm yesterday in terms of, and you could pick games, go and pick that Green Bay New England game. You go and pick the Vegas Broncos game. The Chiefs were excellent last night and really bounced back after that absolute clunker against the Colts. But generally, there's just not a lot of, and I wonder whether or not, like this week specifically, I know players shut this out, but it felt like there was a kind of pool of just that kind of injury pool that was hanging over everybody in terms of everything that had happened on Thursday night and the previous Sunday, and so many questions being asked and so many things being looked at and so much kind of drama and all those sorts of things. It felt like it had sort of impinged a little bit on the actual games, and then you have the injury to Lewis Seen, and you have the Tyrod Taylor concussion, you have the Cam Brake concussion, and all those sorts of Saquon having to start to play at quarterback because Daniel Jones is injured as well. It just felt like it's one of those weeks where everything gets magnified because something else has happened. Do you know what I mean? It felt like a little bit of a hangover, maybe. That's the wrong thing to say when we're talking about concussion, but it did feel like that sort of. I don't know. It just felt slightly weird, but it hasn't been an amazing quality. There's been lots of close games, but it hasn't felt like there's been some amazing quality football. I mean, you look at something like Mike Evans last night. Evans was phenomenal. Made some great catches, but overall, you think that whilst there's been great individual performances, actually collective, not so much so far this season.
To an extent as well, that Chiefs Bucks game is another prime example of it. The Chiefs for the first half of that game absolutely dominated the Bucks and probably felt like they could have been up by more than they were. This is a Bucks team who had held three teams so far to 14, 9, and 3 points this season up until that point, and Mahomes had blown past that by 8 minutes left of the second quarter by a country mile, and they got out to a big lead, and they did let Brady back in. Brady had the back-to-back touchdown drives. You say Mike Evans had a big game. It's obviously huge to see him having all those weapons back on the field for him. But considering they were meant to be this great defense through the first 3 weeks, they got run all over. They got passed all over. They got absolutely picked apart by a good team. And that's why I kind of feel like whilst the score line, 10 points is never tight, but allowing a team to put 31 up on you will always feel like a relatively tight game, like a shootout. That felt like that game was beyond Tampa Bay by
from the start, really, from the first.
Yeah, probably actually, to be fair.
Quarter. But it's fascinating, isn't it? You look at Tampa Bay last week. That defense shut down the Packers pretty much. It was a close, tight game, and then you see what happened yesterday with Kansas City coming in and putting up 41, but then you flip back a week and the Colts can't get the Chiefs can't get past the Colts, and you just kind of think, what was that an anomaly last week?
I don't know if the rest of the world lost Simon Clancy, or is that just me then? But are you back with me, Simon?
I think I am. Am I not here? Yes, I'm all good. Apparently,
this is the issue with the live show.
Maybe it's.
Do I just keep filling? What do I do?
I'm here.
All good.
It's fine. We can edit this all out of the re-show. Michael,
it's all good.
Let us know what's going on.
Will is fine.
Don't forget, if you are listening to me, if you can listen to me right now, we are on Twitter and at Will Gav, I think it's Clancy. I'd have to double check to make sure. You can send any questions in that you might have, or you can hit us up on.
You see, Michael, I think it wasn't me. I think it was probably Will. So.
This is always going to happen, man.
It's more mud to sling at Will. Why don't we carry on with it, and you can just jump in for a couple of seconds. But it did feel like that. Was it an anomaly last week that the Colts just managed to beat the Chiefs, given how fantastic the Chiefs' offense looked last night? You probably wouldn't have seen it because you'd have had a 36 hours into 24 hours in terms of how you went yesterday.
I did see a bit of the second half of the Colts game yesterday, but just going even back on last week. It reminds me of getting up for a game here, the way whenever, and I don't want to go across in terms of a Premier League situation, but teams always play up for certain games, like their defense or their offense always become better in certain occasions. It seemed to me last week like the Colts defense was just on it for a reason against the Chiefs, and they just found a way to get over the line. And the offensive line is still a considerable issue, and we've seen yesterday. I'd be of the opinion that I think that Ballard and Reich are on, I don't want to say borrowed time here, but we're getting very, very close to to that point. And if Mr. Gavin wants to give me a wave, I will bring him back in just whenever he's ready. I know he's getting set up. Here he is. Will, did I do you proud there?
Change of location. Well, I don't know, because I lost Simon at my end when everything still seemed to be working. So I just kept talking to myself, which is what I do with great expertise. But yeah, we running. Was it me that went, I imagine?
It was you, mate. It was nothing to do with us.
Fine. All right.
But yeah, we were just Mike and I were just sort of wrapping on the Bucks and everything that happened in terms of, you know, the Chiefs, and whether last week was anomalous with that loss to the Colts and how weird that was. So we kind of done that game, I think, in a way. Apart from Mahomes was sensational. I mean, the little flip to Clyde Edwards-Helaire was just ridiculous. I mean, you know, it's backyard stuff.
Yeah, I think the running game in general really got going as well. And actually, Clyde Edwards-Helaire for probably the first time in 3 years.
Well. Yeah, Pacheco was excellent when he came in and just spelled Edwards-Helaire, and seems to have sort of let past McKinnon as well. So, yeah, it was a game to remind you, because I thought Kansas City's lack of speed on offense was an issue without Tyreek Hill, and I think it showed up last week against the Colts. And then last night, you just thought, wow, they look fantastic again on offense, and you know. Whether that was Andy and Eric Bieniemy going back to the drawing board and really kind of, you know, coming up with some new wrinkles, or whether it was just, you know, felt like they'd almost had to have a sort of a players only meeting just to sort of sort things out on offense. But yeah, it was I thought it was dominant from the Chiefs last night. It looked like the Chiefs of old, really.
I do think the O-line as part of this. You go back to, you know, when these two played in that Super Bowl in the same stadium, 31-9 win, and they were pressured all over the field for the entirety of the game. And whilst Mahomes was sacked 3 times still last night, he was pressured on far fewer dropbacks. Overall, compared with both that game, but also with the game against the Colts last weekend, they did much better in the trenches against arguably a better defense, I'd say, based on where we are so far this season. All in all, I thought they played really well. So.
Yeah, I think Orlando Pace is really struggling at left tackle though at the moment. I don't really know why, in terms of, you know, turned down that massive contract in the summer, and I think he's not had a great start to the season so far. But I think the interior guys, certainly, especially Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, who was, you know, bargain of this and a lot of other drafts in terms of where he ended up. I know there were some health issues, but yeah, they need to get Pace back on track. But generally, that looked like a much more Kansas City performance last night than you know, that looked like the Chiefs of old without Tyreek Hill, but it looked like the Chiefs of old.
Are the Packers another example this week of just how up and down this league is? Because I mean, I know Olly Hunter in absentia today, but was talking last night about, you know, the run defense being as bad as he is. And then Rodgers, who that passing game in the first half, admittedly off the back of a good Patriots defensive performance, which has not been something we've seen a huge amount of in the last 2 years. But then in the second half, he just looked vintage Rodgers. He I thought he was unreal.
There were four or five throws in the second half that were just like absolute, you know, I mean, the ball to Dubs for the touchdown that was an absolutely sensational pass. But I mean, just the flick of the wrist to, you know, the ball down the right sideline early in the third quarter to Lazard was a great pass. You know, and he came up massive in those big moments. But the first half, he was so out of sync. I mean, and absolutely kudos to I thought the Patriots defense were excellent. I'm not so sold on Jack Jones at the microphone afterwards, sort of saying that it was embarrassing. I mean, mate, stay in your lane. But overall, it's so interesting watching the Packers, because you just like, it feels like Aaron feels like it's not reminiscent of 2018, but in a way it is, in terms of that sort of slightly hero ball kind of style of play that he undertook in the last 18 months of the Mike McCarthy era, in terms of just trying to put everything on his shoulders. The run game is so good, the offensive line is so excellent, that you just think, you know, it must be hard for Matt LaFleur when you've got the talent of Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, but when you've got such a powerful running game, such a strong running game with those two guys in the backfield, you just think, actually, there are times when just lean on that run game with Jones and Dillon, and it is going to take time for the Watsons and the Dobbses and those guys to get back. And Robert Tonyan coming back from the injury, Sammy Watkins obviously you know, out and I think on IR, but you know, when he comes back, it is taking time, and they clearly do miss Devontae Adams. Understandably, why wouldn't you miss the best receiver in the NFL? But I just don't know really what to expect with the Patriots with the Packers, in terms of, you know, they could end up winning it all, or you could think, you know, they might. I mean, I think they'll make the playoffs, obviously, but it's just got to start clicking, and I suspect it will. But the NFC feels like it's so weak that they could end up in the Super Bowl.
It really started to, I thought, in that second half, as we mentioned last night. I mean, we talked about rushing, and the Green Bay run defense did have problems and got gashed a number of times by both Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. And that's considering that we knew that with Bailey Zapp or Zappi, or however you pronounce the surname, under center, we knew they were going to have to lean heavily on that run game, and yet they still weren't able to stop it. They got they went at just over 5 yards a carry, but then Green Bay themselves 199 yards off 35 carries. Jones and Dillon splitting the workload pretty evenly between them as well. And then you look at the receivers: Lazard 6 catches, Romeo Doubs 5 catches off 8 targets. Combining for Dobbs much shorter yardage because his big play was, as you say, chalked off. But Lazard had a big day, which is what they've been desperate for. And then the player who really keeps standing out to me, and this comes back to what we talked about him last week, but also I had a conversation with Zadarius Smith in the Vikings locker room last night when we were talking about that Vikings defensive line and the fact that they let a talent like that go, and seeing Rashawn Gary really take it to a whole new level this year. Forced the fumble, which saw Hoyer go out of the game in the first half, which is an obvious and clear impact. But beyond that, I just felt like on every passing down, 2 sacks, 2 tackle for loss, 2 quarterback hits. And it just felt like it didn't matter who they lined up along against him, whether they put a chip block in, whether they tried to run some kind of double team. He just was powering through guys. I know this is the guy you and Matt both talked about coming out of Michigan, but I think I'm really seeing it this season.
Yeah. The Packers' run defense as well, I think, is you touched on it there. I think that's such an interesting thing, because obviously they lost Adrian Amos, who steps up into the box and is good against the run. But before they lost Amos, they were struggling. I know that Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris are really good players. That's a really good tandem there. But given that they drafted a defensive tackle in Devonta Wyatt, they drafted a 3rd down linebacker in Key Walker, they're really struggling against the run. I don't really know why. It feels like they're doubling up a lot on Kenny Clark, and interior defensive linemen and Devondre Campbell are not winning their one-on-one battles. That's got to get fixed really quickly coming to London, because you've got Saquon Barkley coming off another massive performance, and he's been sensational this season. And you don't want to let Saquon Barkley loose on that defense, because they'll run all over you, and that's got to be a concern for Joe Barry and for the Packers brass.
A little bit of praise on the other side, though, for the Patriots O-line, which had so many question marks in the season. As you say, the run defense, not good, but, Cole Strange had a couple of plays on Kenny Clark where he opened up those run lanes where you're like, oh, maybe he was worth spending a bizarre first-round pick on. I'm not quite sure I'm there yet, but he just had a couple of plays where he really flashed, showed really good strength, really good footwork. And so there's reason to praise on the other side of the ball. I thought the left-hand line much better than the right-hand side of their line. Isaiah Wynn
they've
had
got
a
good
shocker.
players. Yeah, I don't think Wynn played very well. David Andrews obviously a really good center. Michael Onwenu is a good player. I thought Strange played well. You just feel like with the Giants coming in and their ability to run the ball, it could be a long night for the Green Bay run defense if they can't get off the field.
We're also recording this / you're watching it live right now on StreamYard or on Twitter, before we know what the New York Giants are going to do under center next weekend. Because, okay, they're coming in at 3-1 and they're feeling good about themselves. One of those slightly bizarre wins over the Chicago Bears. They've had a few of those this year. The Panthers, the Titans, all kind of tight games, which easily could have gone the other way. But with Daniel Jones going down, with Tyrod Taylor going down, there's Davis Webb is being talked about potentially coming over to London. Are they going to sign somebody? If they do, does that person have a passport in order to fly out on Thursday night, Friday morning to come out here? They have been left in a sticky situation. And as much as everyone's excited to see the Packers come over, and I talked about it being 2 teams with a winning record, it does scare me a little bit. I almost need the Packers run defense to be bad and Saquon Barkley to have a really big game so we get a competitive game in London, because otherwise I am a little concerned that with a makeshift quarterback, this could get quite ugly.
I see that he's day-to-day and that there's a lot of optimism that he's going to play at the weekend, which I think is good. And look, give him credit, give Brian Daboll credit. I think he was hugely maligned for obvious reasons. And I think that he's shown progression week after week, Daniel Jones. I thought he played well yesterday, layered a couple of beautiful balls in. They're really making use of his ability to use his feet and get out of the pocket and make plays with his feet, akin to what Josh Allen did with Buffalo and Brian Daboll, and akin to, you go back to Brian Daboll and Jalen Hurts at Alabama, those sorts of things in terms of, using players that can use their legs and making the most of what they do. And Brian Daboll's bought into Daniel Jones. He's kind of had to. His cart has been tied to him, and I think Jones has repaid some of that. I don't think we're ever going to talk about a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, but you can win with a guy who can get his way into the top 15, and I think Jones is slowly but surely doing that. And let's not pretend that he has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and those guys to throw to. He doesn't. He's making use of not the greatest receiving core in the league, but he has this great running back to rely on, which he's they're making great use of. And when you can hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley, and when he stays healthy, we can throw to him. I mean, the play he made where he got tackled reverse field, Daniel Jones went out in front of him, he blocked on that third down, and he picked up the first down. It's just that's what you want from a guy like that. And if they can, like I said, if they can control the line of scrimmage, and if they can establish that run game on Sunday, the Packers could be in for a long afternoon.
Let's talk about one of the games yesterday that realistically was one of the games of the day going into it, and turned into so despite a team going up big early. We end up with two preseason favourites, the Ravens going to 2-2, the Bills now to 3-1 after the late victory, and some curious decisions on behalf of John Harbaugh and the Ravens. I have to say, on the challenge he had earlier where it looked like Lamar Jackson reached out and got the first down, I cannot see why that wasn't overturned. There was not an angle that I saw where I didn't think that he got the first down. So that felt a little harsh, but that drive ended with no points at all. The thing that really throws me, it's two-tier. It's the decision to not kick the field goal and go for it on fourth down, which is a classic decision where if they score the touchdown, everyone goes, oh, what a genius. Oh, being really aggressive. Really love that. From a team who hadn't scored any points in the second half, it struck me as bizarre. And a team whose defense overall had played pretty well, even though they'd given up that lead. And then late on, they tried to let the Bills score the touchdown. Now, actually, I'm trying to remember who it was in on the tackle, but he said we were told either let them score or strip the ball. And in his attempt to strip the ball, he actually managed to make a tackle almost by accident. And you could see the other players around him giving him some stick. I think it was a Dafe away, possibly, giving him some kind of stick around him for doing so. But I don't hate the let them score thing. I know Matt Sherry, who kind of Gridiron creator, is big on the let them score thing and try and go out and put the ball in the hands of your best player. But again, you've not scored in the second half at all. Your defense has been your best unit. Stopping them getting a field goal and trying to score the other way is probably the better way to go. Just the whole thing for a coach as experienced as Harbaugh, and Marcus Peters had a real go at him on the sideline well, which Peters is a player who has been known to be hot-headed, as we know, but even so, that's not something you see from the Ravens organization very much, is that kind of infighting and that kind of, behind-the-scenes stuff showing out publicly. It felt uncharacteristically poor from a coaching perspective from one of the best in the NFL.
Yeah, I just didn't understand the decision. And it was clear that he doesn't trust his defense. That's why you keep the offense on the field to try and score. But I didn't even understand the play call from Greg Roman. It just made no sense to me. It's just like, why? You've got the most agile, athletic, run-first quarterback in the league, right? An MVP candidate. At least get him in a situation where he's got the opportunity to run instead of a pure sort of 5-step draw. I mean, I know he has Mike Davis open early, but that window closes quite quickly. And then Duvernay comes uncovered in the corner, but you kind of have to feather it in, a la, Ben Roethlisberger to Santonio Holmes in the corner of the end zone at the Super Bowl to try and get that in there. I just don't understand why you wouldn't put Jackson in a situation where he's got the opportunity to use his legs to pick up the touchdown. That just defied belief. But ultimately, just kick the field goal, send it to overtime. You got the best field goal kicker in the game, but it's clear he didn't trust his defense. I thought it was fascinating, watching Marcus Peters, who didn't just say it once. I mean, he was really going at him. And then for Harbaugh to say in the locker room afterwards that he said, I understand we're on the same page. I'm a Marcus Peters guy. I hope he still loves me. We have an honest relationship. I really love him, but I hope he still loves me. And he just that's a coach that knows that he screwed up. And I just think the Ravens, having, blown the game against the Dolphins a couple of weeks ago, now do it again against the Bills. I mean, they were up big
They could be
You know,
4-0 right now.
I don't
Could
think the
easily
Bills,
be 4-0
yeah,
right
I don't
now.
think the Bills have ever won. I think I read earlier the Bills have never won a game when they've been behind by, or haven't won a game in a lot of years when they were behind by more than 17 points. And you just think, how did you manage to blow that at home? You had them exactly where you wanted them, right in your hand, and you managed to blow it. I didn't understand it.
There was two comments from Harbaugh afterwards that kind of struck me about everything that you've said there being completely true. As he said, well, one thing is the analytics say you should have gone for it there, because what you do is you put the other team in a position where they have to drive 98 yards in theory to go and get a score. And they have, and there's the issue that they have 4 downs to play with. Well, actually, on the 98 yards thing, because of the interception, it turns to a touchback, and that becomes 80 yards. And those 18 yards are some of the hardest 18 yards on the field, because you're in the same way it is in the red zone. Your playbook, when you're backed right up to your own goal line, has to completely change, because you can't take the sack, you can't take the safety, etc. And then on top of that, because you haven't taken the field goal, it's not 4 downs for the whole distance of the field. It doesn't change their whole playbook. They have to just get it to the 30, the 40, even, as we saw yesterday at Wembley, in order to put themselves into field goal range. And then everything changes to, 3 and a stop, whatever it might be. It just, I don't know, his whole philosophy on it seemed bizarre to me. There's sometimes where you just go, take the point, take the points.
Especially at that point. The flip side to that argument about their defense, and I don't think their defense is great, let's be honest, but also they're up 20-3, right? They didn't score another point. Do you know what I mean? They didn't score another point in the second half. And that defense turned the ball over twice. It had 2 red zone stops. It allowed 23 points total to a top 5 offense in the league. I think Buffalo were 4 of 11 on third downs. They fairly limited big plays down the field, which has been a killer for teams playing Buffalo generally this season. I think the offense has to hold its hands up a little bit and take some of the blame and some of the responsibility, because it wasn't just on the defense that Baltimore didn't win that game.
Yeah, I still back the Ravens in general because of the coaching, and I do think that defense will figure things out. And they've got Lamar Jackson. We said it; they're 2-2, but the 2 defeats this season are against teams who I think are at the very top end of the AFC through 4 weeks of the year, but also in situations where they probably should have won those games. Sunday night football against the Bengals next weekend, when the Bengals have had 10 days to get ready for that game, and their offensive line looked much improved against the Dolphins, I think is going to be a bit of a litmus test. But then after that, Giants, Browns, I do expect them to get it right. Next weekend, Sunday night football looks like a really, really tasty one with the Bengals.
Yeah. Hard to countenance blown leads of 21 and 17 points, though, at home. Do you know what I mean? That's hard to get your head around.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It feels like the Jets are only winning games on the road and only doing it by coming behind big. Kenny Pickett came into the game, threw a pick with the first pick. I don't want to talk too much about Jets Steelers, but it was a really entertaining finish. And
it was.
Excited to see the Jets do something. Excited to see Zach Wilson do something. And I mean, for somebody who on this show last week said, I thought that Kenny Pickett might be coming soon, to see him throw 3 interceptions. He completed all 13 of his passes that he made. Just 3 of them were to the opposition.
Yeah. I thought, kudos to Zach Wilson, because, he comes back in the game, first game of the season. He's 10 of 12 for 128 yards and a touchdown in the fourth quarter. That's, on the road in Pittsburgh. I know this is not, this isn't the Roethlisberger Pittsburgh Steelers, but I thought he played pretty well. And 5 for 5, 57 yards on that final drive there. I thought he had a couple of big time throws, certainly over the middle of the field to Corey Davis on that final drive. I thought, if this is Zach Wilson, then the Jets are going. There's a lot of young talent on that Jets side, and Robert Saleh said, he's keeping the receipts, and so far they're showing up and they're playing well. They're establishing that run game with Breece Hall. Garrett Wilson looks like he's a really good player. Corey Davis playing complementary football. The offensive line is holding up. Sauce Gardner's playing really well on the back end. I think that, there's a little bit of hope in Jets land. I think a massive game for them at home on Sunday against the Dolphins. But if they can win that, they're in a 3-way tie. If Buffalo win, they're in a 3-way tie for the top of the AFC East, and nobody had that on their bingo card at the start of the season.
No, quite. Just a couple of other thoughts from looking across the games. The AFC West might not be the division we thought it was going into the season. The Raiders finally pick up their first victory. The Broncos score multiple touchdowns for the first time this year, but come away losing 32-23 and ending up at 2-2. I do think that Broncos Jags game we've got here at the end of the month looks really intriguing. Jacksonville in some horrendous circumstances go up early on Philly, who are the last remaining undefeated team in the league, but Trevor Lawrence, off the back of what I thought was his best all-round career performance, maybe outside of in London last year, that he's put on. You get the 5 turnovers in the rain. You get, some of them were on him as much as I think decision-making maybe rather than technique, although the James Bradbury one kind of lofted it up in the air, which I thought was under pressure from an Eagles blitz that I didn't think was necessarily the best of decisions. Few fumbles in the wet condition. I don't know. He still feels like somebody who's yet to fully figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, when you look at the sort of Bishop Sycamore type coaching that he got last year from Urban Meyer in his career, it's understandable. I think we pile so much pressure onto young quarterbacks and expect them to be sensational right from the get-go that within a few games, if they're not playing, and you only have to look at the treatment of a Zach Wilson or a Lawrence or a Tua Tagovailoa or whoever it is over the last few years, if they're not coming out and spinning it like and we've been spoiled because of Mahomes and Jackson and Allen and Herbert and Burrow, and that's fine. But let's not pretend that Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert haven't had their fairly significant issues, but actually some of that has been slightly sort of tapered away because Burrow obviously got to a Super Bowl and played sensationally down the stretch. That Herbert has made some just unbelievable throws, but Justin is also struggling in critical moments of big games like he did in college. He's also throwing big time interceptions. So, it's difficult. I think Trevor Lawrence has to play better, but I think the hangover from Hurricane Ian, the sort of the Philadelphia court certainly played into it. I know both teams had to play in the wet and Jalen Hurts didn't fumble the ball 4 times, but I don't think that was indicative of a Trevor Lawrence performance when it feels like he has really begun to turn the corner. And I think that Jacksonville team is pretty good. I know we've had a question about whether or not they can make the playoffs. I think they'll be right in the mix. I think Doug Peterson's a really good coach. I think he's begun to answer the question about who really was the brains behind that Philadelphia Super Bowl win. And you saw the reaction from the Eagles crowd, which essentially gave him a standing ovation yesterday. Which, look at this guy coming in. Look.
I thought I'd drop in. I was listening to you. Olly Hunter here. I was listening to you, and you're right about the QB situation, Simon. But I was listening, and my meeting finished early, and I thought, I miss these boys. Let me jump on. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on. Finish your thought, and then bring me.
Phillies fans are a notoriously tough crowd. I mean, I can remember once when this was years ago back at the Vet when a Santa Claus parachuted into the ground, into the stadium, and he landed, instead of landing on the field, he landed in the crowd, and they broke his leg. I mean, it's like, and the vet used to have a jail and a courtroom under the stadium because there was so much trouble in the stands.
Philly fans love it when you talk about them booing Santa or it's their favorite thing in the world.
But you only have to see the reverence with which the players, there was a queue of players waiting to hug Doug Peterson after the game yesterday. And Jason Kelsey swapped shirts and got Doug Peterson's raincoat and stuff. And, then it was Peterson, then it was Lane Johnson, then it was Jalen Hurts, then it was Brandon Graham. There's this long list of stud players just going up and, wanting to spend time with this guy that won them a Super Bowl. And, I think that Jacksonville team are going to be difficult to beat. They need a few more pieces. They need, Christian Kirk needs a bit of help out wide and those sorts of things. I think the linebackers are sensational, Lloyd and the kid they got in free agency, whose name escapes me. But I just think generally they're an improving upside team, and if Lawrence can get that help, then I think it'll be really interesting moving forward. But I don't think that was indicative of Trevor Lawrence's career having the 4 fumbles. It's just one of those situations.
That being said, Philly coming from 14 points down, doing it with the run game. We've seen that Jalen Hurts can move the ball this year. This idea that he was just a fancy quarterback, a numbers quarterback, a garbage time quarterback, I think has been proven to be garbage so far in this 4-0 start. But they ran the ball brilliantly. Miles Sanders, who I have to say came into the season feeling very apathetic towards as the starting back, and Kenneth Gainwell I thought did play well as a kind of secondary combination, but 27 carries, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns, including the game-tying touchdown. with 4 minutes remaining in that first half. Like, I thought he was superb. I thought that the Eagles looked great again. And, you know, I just need to figure out, it's a little bit like everything we've said on this show so far. We're in week 4 and it's been a weird first 4 weeks of the season. I'm not sure that the Cardinals are the team to truly test the Eagles, but so far they've faced a very odd collection of teams, and they only go on to, you know, Dallas may be a bit stouter on Sunday Night Football in a couple of weeks, but realistically, it's the end of November when they play the Packers, where they play an actual full-blown contender, as I currently see it. Maybe the Cowboys with Dak Prescott back, but they've just won a bunch of games with Cooper Rush, so who knows? I don't know. I still want to see them play a great team, but they ran the ball so well that
the evolution of Hurts as a quarterback as well. I think Brian Johnson, the quarterback coach, deserves huge credit for the job that he's done, because, you know, I remember Matt Sherry and I had this conversation when Jalen was at Alabama, and talking about the conversation around him when he came out would be fascinating. But the way that he's evolved into a passing quarterback with the ability to run, there are a few similarities to Randall Cunningham in terms of just the ability to make yards with his feet, and yeah, Cunningham had a bigger arm, but I do get some reminders of the two of them when they're playing. But I think you know, what's interesting about Jalen Hurts is that it feels like he's getting better. I think, just like you, I want to see him in a really big game, but I do kind of look at their schedule and think, and the NFC generally, and think, I don't know, like, where are these big in-conference games coming? Because the conference is like, it's not massive, you know, in terms of the ability of teams in the NFC at the moment. It just feels like there's, you know, like you said at the very top of the show, Will, there's a lot of teams around 16th best in the league, and most of them seem to be in the NFC.
Two of them playing, of course, in that 48-45 Seahawks-Lions game, which we don't need to talk a lot about, except to say, great score, good fun, not good football teams.
Terrible defenses.
Yeah, a couple of good offenses. I mean, Lions still moving the ball without Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift and DJ Chark. Fair play to them. TJ Hockenson had a ludicrous game. But, yeah, I mean, I don't expect either of those teams to really be competing when we come down to it, except that
I did think it was interesting. I did think it was interesting, though, that Dan Campbell started to talk about Aaron Glenn and potentially that, you know, changes need to be made, and he loves Aaron, but, you know, things need to be really. I do think that's interesting in terms of the direction that they're going. Just one thing on the Eagles, though, you go back and look away at they got the Cardinals on the road, they got the Cowboys at home, the Steelers at home, the Texans, the Commanders, the Colts. I mean, they could still be unbeaten when they play the Packers at home on November the 28th. I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Do you know what I mean? It's, you know,
that Cowboys one is the one challenge before them, but it's why I said it. I think that Packers is the first time they play an out-and-out contender for me right now. I think the Cowboys were still waiting on health. We're still waiting on some factors. The Cowboys still feel like a team who could go very deep in the playoffs to me. The talent is clearly there, but I haven't seen them.
Stretch after the Packers, Titans at home, Giants, Bears, Cowboys, Saints, Giants. Doesn't feel like the toughest schedule in the world. You know, they're not playing any of the monster AFC teams that, you know, they're not playing a Buffalo or a Baltimore or, you know, any of those teams at the moment. So it's a very interesting schedule for the Eagles.
We've kind of talked our way through most of the games, Ollie. It's been a bit over the place. It's been a bit, you know, rambling, as is our want. We did go into the Packers and the questions you were asking about the run defense, and
we don't need to go on to it. We don't need to go back to it.
You did win. Was there?
I know, but we want to get to a backup. I'll have to listen back for Simon's thoughts on Zappy, but we, you know, Green Bay are a real Jekyll and Hyde team. And they Jekyll and Hyde during games rather than and not just week to week. It's weird, but I would hope by the time that they play the Eagles that they've figured it out, and actually perhaps a trip to London. And we hear this all the time from teams, apart from the Baltimore Ravens when Harbaugh came over and stunk the place out. But we hear it all the time from teams that going away on a big trip to London or well, it'll be Germany next month as well. But going away can really bring a team together. It's business, it's focus, and it seems like Rodgers doesn't have any concentration at times. Things are getting away from him, or things upset him too much, and it affects him, and he gets in a funk during games. So I think a trip away may allow the Packers to find their rhythm and on both offense and defense, because at the moment it's kind of all over the place.
I think we're all very excited about the Packers being in town next week. And I have to say, my final thought, and then I'll go around everyone else. The London games always bring a great atmosphere, a great crowd, a great kind of vibe to the whole thing. I really felt like yesterday, I was there from very early doors to get set up because we did our stuff at the Bricklayers beforehand as well. I was there from sort of 9 a.m. and saw crowds already starting to amass at the shop and around the stadium. And even though they hadn't put on all the kind of nonsense they sometimes do with the QB throwing, kicking bits and everything else that they sometimes have, it just felt like it was a real carnival atmosphere, particularly yesterday, more so than I think I've ever seen it before. And I think that was for a game that, whilst ended up being a good game, next week, everyone was talking about next week. Everyone was talking about the Packers game. I've never had so many people ask if I know where they can get tickets, or if I can get them tickets, or if there's any possibility of a place to watch the game, because it does feel really significant them coming to town next weekend. And I think it's going to be, as long as we can hopefully get a half decent game, I think it's just going to be fantastic next weekend. Plus Simon Clancy's there. I can't wait.
Oh, mate, that's the highlight, isn't it? That's like there's Aaron Rodgers. He's the highlight. Sorry, Simon. And then it's you. I don't care. I don't care about the dual threat of Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. I don't even care about Saquon Barkley. I don't care about the likely uniform matchup. It's all about the Simon Clancy.
Saquon Clancy is who.
Saquon Clancy. That's great.
Simon, did you have any final thoughts there? Anything we've not touched on?
Just the Falcons, really. I just looking at the stat sheet. They obviously won the game, but could you, if I was to say to you, Marcus Mariota completed 7 passes, that their leading receiver, Olly Zacchaeus, had 2 catches, that Kyle Pitts had 1 catch, Drake London had 2 for 17. Would you have thought that team had beaten the Cleveland Browns? I mean, absolutely zero. But
I did enjoy it, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who had the Falcons? I mean, I've said it before, bingo cards, but who had the Falcons at 2-2 at this point in terms of, given the absolute lack of quality on their roster. So, hell of a coaching job that's being done by Arthur Smith at the moment to keep that team not only competitive, but, they're at 500 at the moment.
Love that. Good bit of positivity. Ollie, you didn't hear anything else we said, so you have a clean slate. Any final thoughts?
You know what we had, and we had an incredible slate of uniforms this week. #KitWatch. The Giants throwbacks were just stunning. The piping on that jersey, the Giants emblazoned across the helmet was so nice. The Saints all white with the new helmet was glorious. Even the Cardinals look great when they go all red
with the line above and below the name on the nameplate. I love that.
Yeah. There are some. I think the uniform situation in the NFL has never been healthier. It looks great. It looks so good. #KitWatch.
At a time where we're saying the league looks as average as it ever has in terms of quality, not in terms of output and excitement and fun, but in terms of quality, it's good to know that
it's easy on the eye. It's easy on the eye. A bit like the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, easy on the eye. It looked magnificent. And I was up with Will and the TalkSport guys for most of the game, but I went down for the last 5 minutes, which was a really good time to go down into the bowl. And man, it's way louder, and you'll find that next week, Simon. And when we've got 2 really hugely supported teams that are coming down, it is going to be loud. I think next week or this Sunday, oh my God, it's this Sunday, 6 days. I think it's going to be the loudest and most NFL-like game that we will ever have had, because the Packers
on Sunday.
Packers are coming out in force, and I think pretty much all the neutrals will be rooting for the Giants, apart from Jets fans and Cowboys fans. You know what I mean? So I think the atmosphere is going to be off the scale if we have anything to go by the last game. The stadium's really, really the stadium is just glorious. I was in the Vikings press conferences afterwards, and to a man, all of the guys were saying this is a great place to play football. Adam Thielen said he wants to come back every year, which is, I mean, all right, they've just won the game, but that's ridiculous. So it's starting to feel like a proper NFL stadium. I mean, that was the whole intention, and I just loved it. I loved it. I can't wait for Friday. I'm going to go to Packers practice. Maybe annoy Aaron Rodgers.
Giants practice.
Are they in town? I don't know.
I'm sending Ollie Wilson, our commentator, to Giants practice. No one else is going.
That's classic Ollie Wilson, isn't it? So I'm looking forward to Friday. There's going to be beers galore on Saturday. I think is there Gridiron beers on Thursday? Maybe.
That's been talked about.
That's been talked about. And then the main event on Sunday. Wow! It's just a great time.
Whoosh.
It's a great time to be an NFL fan in the UK, and I love it. Roll it on.
And then over to the bricklayers for some Come On Eileen.
Can I throw one thing out there? Matt Milano, defensive MVP.
Oh, what a game. What a game he had.
He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
What a player.
I love that. That was what a note to end on. Bring it back to football from Ollie's lovely ranting about how great London is. I think we're all just feeling the love today, and I'm very happy with it. I'm going to go back to bed now. Everyone have a lovely rest of your day. And I will see you all on Thursday or Friday or Saturday. Can't wait for it. At UK Gridiron on Instagram, at Gridiron on Twitter. You can find us on TikTok, all those other good platforms as well. Just interact with us. Let us know. You can come and put the questions on the weekly show. You can send us questions in the week or on a Sunday that we'll answer on the show. If you see us in London, come and say hello.
Yeah.
We did have a couple last week, and it was lovely.
Come and say hi.
Well, a few little fist bumps.
Not too close. Behind the velvet rope.
Do not cut that out. Do not cut that out, Michael. That has to stay in. People need to know the real Simon Clancy.
Simon Not Too Close Clancy. That's his name. Stay back.
Saquon Not Too Close Clancy. Right, we'll leave it there.
Saquon.
Thank you so much for listening or watching. This has been the Gridiron Show. Oh, I even put the card up early. What is this?
Get out.
Amateur hour.